The capacity to learn is a gift. The ability to learn is a skill. The willingness to learn is a choice. Brian Herbert. Good afternoon to everyone present here for the fourth webinar organized by the Alumni Association of Government College of Physiotherapy, Chennai. I would like to introduce today's speaker, Mr. S. Krishnasamy. Mr. S. Krishnasamy did his bachelor's degree from the Government College of Physiotherapy, Chennai in the year 1978. He retired working as a clinical therapist in the government sector and is still practicing as a consultant in the City Tower Hospital, Ananagar, Chennai. He has been a physical therapist for a former Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, Kalaignar Karunanidhi. He has been a best lecturer for various universities from across the world and is adored by his students, and has been an inspiration to many aspiring therapists. He was one of the key persons in the formative years of the Tamil Nadu State Physiotherapy Council and is now the Vice President of the Tamil Nadu State Physiotherapy Council. Now over to you, sir, for the session.
Yeah, very good afternoon to everyone. Welcoming Madam Francis, Senior Sir Thurasabai Madam and Karisan Sir. I have a special mention here about Madam Francis. She is not only a teacher here, she is helping the students in many ways. I greatly appreciate your work, Madam. Even though you retired from government college, your welfare towards the students is still continuing. I heard a lot of news coming about. Thank you so much for your enduring work, ma'am. Thank you so much. So I'll start my topic. Heart attack, is it preventable? Is it a divine will? Or the graft is the only solution? Where is the remedy? So though it looks like a negative subject, there are a lot of positives in this. So first of all, when I go to the college for lectures to talk about this, the very first question I ask the students is whether heart attack and cardiac arrest are same. 99% of the students, they answer yes, both are same. Because when they pronounce the death, some cases they pronounce it as cardiac arrest. Some cases they pronounce it as heart attack, massive heart attack. Of course, massive heart attack and cardiac arrest, even the best of the clinicians not able to differentiate. But none of them do the autopsy for these type of non-medical legal cases. So both are different actually. What is heart attack? In our house, if you lose water supply, suddenly the water supply is cut, what will happen? Everything will go dry. Same way, this is what you call a heart attack. The blood supply to the heart is some interruption or a reduced blood supply to the myocardium or a sudden stoppage of blood to the myocardium leads to heart attack. Whereas the cardiac arrest is like electrical supply to our house. What happens if the electrical supply goes off? The whole place goes dark. See, this is the difference because the brain sends impulses. The nerve supply goes off, it is called cardiac arrest. And there is some problem in the blood supply, it is called cardiac heart attack. So when we studied about the conducting system of the heart, starting with the SA node, supposed to be the pacemaker. From the SA node to AV node into bundle of His. That's what the conducting system goes on. If anything goes wrong in the conducting system, it stores as atrial fibrillation, then lead up to ventricular fibrillation. A patient with the ventricular fibrillation has to go for an option called pacemaker. This is almost like a CAPG for heart attack. They'll have cardiac arrhythmia to start with. They'll have unusual tachycardia, unusual bradycardia. The only option to neutralize the heart rate is going for a pacemaker. It could be an external pacemaker or an internal pacemaker. So when it comes to heart attack, the God has given a beautiful measure to prevent this dreadful episode. So if you look at the Indian mortality rate, I'm talking about the before COVID-19, the Indian mortality rate, the cardiac heart attack leads in the 5th place. So day by day, we are losing a lot of youngsters because of this cardiac problem, a major cardiac problem all over the world. more so in the Western countries. At least in India, we are in the 5th place. Most of the developed countries, if they look at the mortality rate, it's number 1 because they don't have the communicable diseases in the Western countries. Whereas in India, a developing country like India, the communicable diseases in the leading front. So in Indian mortality rate, this is the 5th in the place. So we want to reduce it and take it up to the higher level. It should go. That's what this topic has been emerged. I have been associated 2 stalwarts in the Madras city. One is Professor Tanigachalam. Last week you heard a lot about Dr. Venkatesh talking about him and Ramchandra, because he entered Ramchandra in 96. Whereas I have been associated with Dr. Tanigachalam right from 1984. He was just 2 buildings away from where I am practicing now in Anna Nagar. So he is the leading cardiologist for most of the people, including the President of India. He is now the earlier Vice Chancellor Ramchandra. Now he is the head of the department in Institute of Cardiology in Ramchandra. So he has given me this situation. I'll send you most of the patients who are opted for the CAPG or pushing themselves for CAPG. You work on them, try to change their lifestyle, because you have a dietitian. Her secretary is a dietitian by name Lata, and we both worked in tandem. And we corrected so many people who have been posted for CAPG and pulled them out of it. This is where the light at the end of the tunnel that sparks me in my mind. The very basic idea for me to have this topic. Physiotherapists are the major person spending most of their time with the patients. The time frame they spend with the patients are very, very long when compared with the other medical fraternity. So this one point makes me to strongly feel that we should feel well equipped when it comes to heart attack or heart related problems. So the major cause for this heart attack is what you call coronary artery disease. A pair of coronary arteries supplying the myocardium. A pair of coronary arteries supplying the myocardium, and the 2 pairs of coronary veins taking care of the coronary circulation. So the right coronary artery taking care of the right half of the heart, and the left coronary artery taking care of the left half of the heart. You know very well the major conducting system prevails in the right half of the heart, namely the SA node, AV node, bundle of His and Purkinje fibers, and cardiac tendinae, the tendon of the papillary muscles. So whenever something goes wrong with the right coronary artery, it triggers into conducting, it interferes with the correct conducting system and produce atrial fibrillation and lead up to tachycardia. If there is anything wrong with the left coronary artery, the major significant artery is the left coronary artery. It is, when compared to the right coronary artery, it gains significance simply because the left half of the heart pumps blood to all parts of the body. Even though the heart pumps blood to all parts of the body, the heart as an organ, it has to get its blood supply. That is taken care of by these coronary arteries. So the left coronary artery starts as a left main and gives rise to 2 branches. It starts as a left main and gives rise to 2 branches. One goes anteriorly, the other goes laterally. The branch which goes anteriorly gives rise to left anterior descending artery, LAD. If anyone happen to see an angiogram report, you can see this abbreviation, LAD, left anterior descending artery. It is popularly called as widowmaker's artery in the Western world. So it has another branch called diagonal branch. The branch which goes laterally gives rise to obtuse marginal branch and circumflex branch. These are all the major branches of the left coronary artery. Whereas the right coronary artery, you have an important branch called posterior descending artery, and an apical branch, a coronal branch, and nodal branch. The nodal branch supplies to all the nodes. This is a short format of the coronary arteries. So you can see the symbols in the coronary angiogram, cath report. You can see LAD. They'll put it in the blood vessel and mark it in black, say 100% block, 60% block, 90% block in LAD. The circumflex branch shows 60% block. So if you can happen to see those. So these coronary arteries are having certain special features. They are not like your brachial artery or femoral artery. They are going straight in the human body. See, the brachial artery and femoral artery, for that matter, superior iliac artery and renal artery, they are like highways. If you travel on a highway, what happens? Most of the roads are straight. So the coronary artery is like you're driving on a terrain. So hill station, you see so many curves and bends. That's what the nature of the coronary arteries. They are encircling the myocardium. Each and every time the heart contracts and relaxes, these arteries are bent and relaxes, bent and straight. So the mechanical stress on these arteries are very, very high. God has anticipated this and provided an extra layer of smooth endothelial cells encircling the tunica intima. You know pretty well the blood vessel has got three distinct layers. Tunica intima is the innermost, tunica media is the middle, and tunica adventitia is the outermost layer. Anticipating this enormous mechanical stress, the God has given a layer of additional endothelial cells. This is the nature of the coronary arteries, for that matter, any arteries. So, how this disease starts, how the coronary artery disease starts, it has so many chapters. You can heard about someone diagnosed with the ischemic heart disease, someone diagnosed with the angina, someone diagnosed with the unstable angina, someone diagnosed with the Prinzmetal angina. So these are all the different chapters in coronary artery disease. So actually how it starts, how this artery disease starts. So there are non-vulnerable group. There are three non-vulnerable groups. They are coming under the age, gender, and family history. Non-vulnerable group. Anyone who is aged, prone to get coronary artery disease because of the wear and tear. So what happens interiorly, there will be an arteriosclerosis, the erosion of the tunica intima along with the endothelial cells. Because of the erosion of the tunica intima, the passage becomes narrow. The lumen of the intravascular area becomes very narrow, and the blood supply will get, the hemovelocity will get reduced. The second chapter is, I'll come to that later, but since we are dealing with the age factor, this is inevitable. And erosion in the interior part of the coronary artery wall is inevitable. Anyone who is aged, they will find the erosion, the arteriosclerosis, medically it is called as. So when it comes to gender, who is prone to get, whether male or female? So as far as I know, female, the wife gives headache to the husband, they don't involve in it. So you know pretty well the men are most involved when it comes to gender. So why I'm saying man is most involved, because their lifestyle is entirely different from men to women. And also the women has got a wonderful protective gear in the form of a menstrual cycle. So the menstrual cycle, the hormones plays an important role when it comes to protecting the coronary artery disease for women. So this is only up to a lady attaining menopause. Once a lady attains menopause, she is coming on par with a man of her same age, for that matter of coronary artery disease. So gender-wise, male takes about 75% of the coronary artery disease striking the man, and 25% of the female they are being involved. Then take up the family history. If anyone suffers a previous generation who loses their father or mother at the age of 75 or 80 because of coronary artery disease, the next generation, they can expect this disease striking 5 to 6 years earlier. These are all non-vulnerable group: age, gender, and family history. All these are correctable with the above point we are going to make. Then who are all the vulnerable group, are what we call risk markers. The risk markers starts with the first risk is the stress. You know, the stress is engulfing the whole world, especially after this COVID-19. Yeah, each and every group, the poorest of the poor, the richest of the rich, is into stress. So stress plays an important role when it comes to coronary artery disease. A man who is stressed up, he has got every chance of landing up in coronary artery disease much early to a non-stressful man. So stress plays an important role. The second comes smoking. So the smokers are more vulnerable group because the nicotine goes and irritates the tunica intima and the erosion takes place much early. Because of the erosion, the vulnerability of forming taking the disease to the next level increases highly. The smoking, nicotine is a stimulant. It stimulates the heart, it stimulates the blood vessels, it stimulates the brain. A stimulated myocardium requires a lot of oxygenated blood, whereas the other byproduct of smoking is a carbon monoxide, which takes away the oxygen from the system and deprives the myocardium in getting the much needed oxygenated blood supply. Nicotine and carbon monoxide are the two powerful byproducts of smoking. So active smoking and passive smoking. Yeah. See, when it comes to passive smoking, a person who is happen to be his colleague staying close by in the office or in the working place, he has got a more chance of getting involved when it comes to smoking, the risk of smoking. Then comes diabetes, the common metabolic disease which can produce or vulnerable to get coronary artery disease bit early. Simple reason is because of diabetes, the hemovelocity will come down. All the metabolic waste will take away to the system, will get slowed down. Whenever there is a reduced velocity, that makes way for the fat to get deposited in the blood vessel. The reduced hemovelocity is the major cause when it comes to diabetes. But diabetes is a very beautiful disease as long as it is isolated. Unfortunately, it has a good companions. It affects all the systems in the human body. That's an unfortunate thing for being a diabetic patient. So the next comes hypertension. So who is called hypertension? See, when we measure blood pressure, we see systolic and diastolic. And the difference between the systolic and diastolic is called pulse pressure. So all these pressures comes into play when it comes to a coronary arterial disease. So what is systemic hypertension? What is essential hypertension? What is global hypertension? These are all different episodes in a hypertension. So when you have hypertension, what do you need to do? The doctor advises restrict your salt. Your salt intake should be less than 2.5 grams per day. It's normally for non-hypertensive people, 5 grams per day. So once you are diagnosed with systemic hypertension, so your system is going to get involved. Your blood vessels are taking the brunt of the force. So you need to control your hypertension by reducing your salt intake, because salt has got the capacity to retain the water in the body. Whenever the water is the water retention increases the pressure on the blood vessels. Simply because once the pressure gets increased, the artery has got the vulnerability to get break. It's not only for coronary artery disease, even for a stroke. It produces a hemorrhage. Hemorrhagic stroke is very common because of uncontrolled systemic hypertension. So the hypertension has to be controlled with reduced salt intake and suitable antihypertensives prescribed by the cardiologist. What are the antihypertensives? There are 6 groups of antihypertensives. One is commonly used as a beta blockers. The second one is a calcium channel blockers. The third one is a ACE inhibitors, that angiotensin conversion enzyme inhibitors, and ARB drugs, and alpha blockers, and diuretics. These are all the 6 major groups of drugs which will effectively control your blood pressure, provided the blood pressure has to be monitored regularly, along with the reduced intake of salt. I'm not talking about the salt intake when you add for the curd rice and you add for the buttermilk. The people with hypertension should avoid pickles, puppets, and all the salt infused food items. Right. Next comes dyslipidemia. The next major risk factor after hypertension is dyslipidemia. What is dyslipidemia? I don't call it as a hyperlipidemia because we need fat. Human metabolism cannot run without fat. One need to take plenty of fat after carbohydrate and protein. So why fat is essential? If you look at the beneficial effects of fat, it is enormous. To produce hormones, you need fat. To produce enzymes, you need fat. To produce a powerful enzyme called bile, you need fat. So if you can list out to control the body temperature, you need fat. So you need fat, but what sort of a fat you take is matter most. See, you have, when it comes to fat, there are three types. One is saturated fat, another one is unsaturated fat, the third one is called trans fat. So people who consume plenty of saturated fat lands into trouble when compared with the unsaturated fatty acids. For example, a person who is consuming a lot of red meat is vulnerable to develop dyslipidemia. A person who takes a lot of protein like chicken, fish, I'm not talking about the fish who has been fried in the with the oil, possibly with the oven. The non-oiled fried fish, they are good. They have plenty of polyunsaturated fatty acids of omega-6 series. If you take Eskimos, they don't get any cardiac disease. The Eskimos are the major segment in the world, consumes a lot of fish. The major fish consumers in the world are the Eskimos. They don't get involved in the simple reason why I recommend fish when it comes compared to the red meat is you always follow the Eskimo diet. This will take away the already deposited fat from your body. I will come to that later. So when it comes to what is dyslipidemia, what is the difference between hyperlipidemia and dyslipidemia? If you start doing your lipid profile, your periodical medical checkup, they do a test called lipid profile. This should be done with the previous day of absolute fasting for 12 hours. That is the standard protocol prescribed by all over the world. The previous day you need to, suppose you are going for blood test tomorrow morning. You need to have tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock your appointment for blood test. You need to have your dinner before 8 today. So you need absolute fasting of 12 hours when you take up the lipid profile in order to get the results in an absolutely most reliable way. So when you happen to do a lipid profile, they list out total cholesterol, high density like HDL cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, VLDL, very low density lipoprotein, and serum triglycerides. These are all the 5 segments you can see it in a lipid profile. Usually the total cholesterol should not exceed 200 milligram for an individual who is below 40 years. A person once crosses the age of 40, the total cholesterol level should be between 150 to 200. It should be in and around 150. Once you cross the age of 50 years, your total cholesterol should not cross 150 at any cost. So this comes to total cholesterol. So when the total cholesterol exceeds 200, 250, they call it as a hyperlipidemia. So when it comes to fat, as I already told you, there are 2 groups. One doing good for you, that's called good cholesterol. The other one which is doing a lot of bad for you it's called a bad cholesterol. Which is a good cholesterol here is the high density lipoprotein. HDL cholesterol is a good cholesterol. And the LDL, low density lipoprotein, is the bad cholesterol. If you take the very low density lipoprotein, VLDL, that is the ugly cholesterol. So you have a good cholesterol, you have a bad cholesterol, you have an ugly cholesterol. So the more and more you consume good unsaturated fatty stuffs, you will have more HDL along with synchronized with very, very good exercise in any form, walking. It could be an aerobic or it could be anaerobic exercise, depending upon your limitation and ability. So as long as you combine your diet with the exercise, this cholesterol balance, you cannot strike the balance. As I told you, good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, and very bad cholesterol. And another one is a trans fat, which is supposed to produce, it can be an unsaturated fat, but when it comes to absorption in the body and assimilation in the human digestive system, it can produce a lot of pro-oxidants. It will release a lot of pro-oxidants. Antioxidants are good, but the pro-oxidants are bad for your health. So it will release a lot of pro-oxidants. That's why the trans fat is a bit dangerous. So why I am calling it as a dyslipidemia? As I told you, HDL is a friendly cholesterol and LDL is a bad cholesterol. So if you have a less good cholesterol and high LDL, very low HDL and very high LDL, you are coming under the classical dyslipidemia, an altered lipid profile. It's not favorable to you. At the same time, if you have a high HDL in the higher level and LDL within normal or less than the required normal level, so you will have a wonderful benefit of the cholesterol. This is how the lipid profile has to be. The LDL should be less than the normal level, which is approximately less than 100, whereas the HDL should be anything over 45 is beneficial. But if you keep above the level of 60 or 65 milligram diluted milk, it should be excellent. It will do a lot of excellent benefit to your body. This is why it's called as a dyslipidemia. If your HDL is low, you don't get the beneficial effect. The LDL will do the damage. This is the reason we put it as a dyslipidemic, a patient who is being diagnosed with dyslipidemic. So the next is, after your diabetes, smoking, stress, dyslipidemia, when it comes to diet, the diet is a major part in our lifestyle. So what sort of a diet one should take? A lot of people you have seen that they are eating to live. Now, once you cross the age of 40, you should always eat to live. There is a stage it has gone, they live to eat. You can see people who go to the buffet or any dinner for that matter, they'll go beyond their limit. This is what you call a good eater, and this should be cut off once you cross the age barrier of 40, because the wear and tear starts in a rapid pace once you cross the age of even 35 if you are having stress. So all this, the diet plays a vital, what you should take, what you should not take. Well, you are being diagnosed with the diabetic, you need to take plenty of proteins, come down on your carbohydrate, and more of unsaturated fat. This is the diet protocol for a patient with diagnosed with diabetic with coronary artery disease on the first stage, coronary artery on the first stage. So what are all the, you people know, what are all the stuffs has got carbohydrate? All the fresh fruits. A diabetic can eat fruits. They should not get away from taking fruits, because fruit has got fructose, a unimolecular carbohydrate, which is easily taken away by our energy. The first, when our body looking for energy, they look for energy in the first form. 1 gram of carbohydrate, it got 8 molecules of ATP. 1 gram of protein has got 16 molecules of ATP. And 1 gram of fat has got 32 molecules of ATP, adenosine triphosphate. That is the energy packets. So when you take carbohydrate, you tell the people that comes to you with the diabetic, ma'am, you can take fruits. Fruits are not being restricted for you, provided when you take fruit, come down on your rice intake. You keep the rice when you keep the place where you keep the vegetables. The rice should take the place of the vegetables, and vegetables should take the place of the rice place. So more of vegetables, a lesser amount of rice, and lot of maybe you can take fruits, plenty of fruits, which will easily break down when it comes to carbohydrate metabolism. Right. This is for people, diet regimen for diabetic people. How to control diabetic? See, there are a table stands on 4 legs. A table stands on 4 legs. One is a diet. One leg is called a diet. The other leg is the drugs prescribed by your diabetologist. The third leg is the exercises. And the fourth leg is determination to fight this disease. These 4 legs will take care of the diabetes. It is an excellent disease to control as long as it is isolated, provided it should not have bad companions. I'm repeating this because people with diabetes can get affected right from head to toe. You can heard about all the padis, diabetic retinopathy, diabetic nephropathy, so many diabetic vascular problem. All the systems get affected because of diabetes. So how to get diabetes? Because a lot of latest drugs have come into the market, but I strongly recommend one Dr. Pramod Tripathi from Bombay. He comes out with a really most suitable way of lifestyle, and most of the members, he started in the year 2014. When he started, there were only 500 people in the group, 500 and odd. Now in the year 2020, he has got 75,000 of people have been registered in his group. It is not chargeable. You just follow his lifestyle. You can interact with him, supporting your blood sugar fasting and postprandial. He will guide you what to do, what not to do. So Dr. Pramod Tripathi from Bombay, he was in Jaslok Hospital, and now he is a full-time practitioner, an excellent diabetologist who is not for medicines. So when it comes to diabetes, we can keep talking about the problems in the diabetes for long. So when the diet is not able to control the diabetes, so you all should remember diabetes is not curable. It's only controllable. The controllable in the form of either by drugs or insulin prescribed by the doctor. Some of the tablets you need to take it before food, and some of the tablets you need to take it after food. So follow the strict prescription from the diabetologist and follow the protocol prescribed by him. So you will have a good control of your diabetes. And if you happen to take insulin, the best option to take insulin around the umbilicus, the best site of taking insulin, less painful, and the very good rate of absorption you find around the umbilicus for when it comes to insulin absorption. So diabetes can get easily controllable, and there are insulin sensitizers and insulin resistant drugs. So you can very well, there are a lot of people who will have a very good fasting. Fasting should be somewhere 90 to 120. And postprandial should be somewhere around 140 to 160. If you ask me, if you keep your fasting blood sugar less than 150 and postprandial up to 100, you are well served by the carbohydrate as a foodstuff. You can take it granted that you have a good control of your diabetes. A fasting blood sugar less than 150 and a postprandial, the 2 hours postprandial of up to less than 100, 160, 140. Sometimes people, the patients coming to you say, my sugar is 180. Don't bother about it. They're just numbers. If you check tomorrow, it can be 140. So just to encourage them, the fear of a high blood glucose level will increase the stress on the diabetic people. So encourage them in a most polite manner. Just tell them these are only numbers. These numbers will do magic next day. So provided you advise them the proper diet and exercise pattern, they will have a good control your diabetes. So, so suppose if you want to take last 3 months, a person who's recently diagnosed with diabetes, they can do a test called HbA1c. That is nothing but your glycemic control in the past 3 months. The reverse, you are going back. HbA1c of anywhere or less than 7 is considered as normal index. It's a glycemic index, glycosylated hemoglobin test, because our RBC's lifespan is only 120 days. A RBC in the blood, the lifespan of RBC is only 120 days. So they extract the hemoglobin and test it to the glycosylated hemoglobin test. They can find a lot of glucose fragments in the hemoglobin. Based on that, they give the index. Preferably, it should be somewhere around 6.5 to 7 is accepted as normal. That means you have got a good control for the past 3 months. HbA1c. This is the test for diet. Then people who live without exercise, sedentary lifestyle, they always be lazy. They don't want to get into work. So they also have an equal risk of getting into coronary artery disease. So how to pull them off? Just motivate them by your pep talk. Tell them how important the exercises are, how important your lifestyle has to be. No point is confining to the bed. Come out of the house, do some activities of your choice. It can be gardening, or it can be walking with listening to the music, or any form, watching something. Ask them to get into an active life from sedentary lifestyle. These are all the most vulnerable group when it comes to coronary artery disease. Then, the personality behavior. There are people always being perfectionists. They'll pronounce themselves, or they project themselves to the society. They are very, very perfect. They will not deviate. These people are prone to get into coronary artery disease than a non-perfectionist, because the stress on the non-perfectionist, taking things granted, is less, and a person with the perfectionist, the stress is more, because he always want to be perfection and try to achieve his target. People always have egoistic, jealous. They have a very good chance of getting into this coronary artery disease than a person very humorous. He laughs himself. He makes others laughing. So the laughing plays an important role when it comes to relaxing the coronary blood vessels, relaxing your mind. So the personality behavior has to be, they diagnose the type A, type B. Type A, they are vulnerable to get into coronary artery disease. Type B is, as I said, they are the people, they laugh and make others laugh. They don't get into problem. So these are all the certain risk factors. And when it comes to people, what sort of exercises they should do? As a physiotherapist, you should always tell your patients coming to you, irrespective of the problem, a pep talk about this coronary artery disease, heart attack, or they will not get panic. You tell them this is nothing to panic. These are all the lifestyle you need to change in your regimen. So when it comes to prescribing the right exercises for his age, when it comes to age, limitation and ability are the two cardinal marks, are the two real hallmarks when it comes to prescribing exercises. You should not prescribe an exercises beyond his ability. You should not prescribe exercises format beyond his limitation. So when it comes to prescription of exercise, limitation and agility, or ability plays a vital role. It could be a reconditioning exercise. It could be an isometric. It could be an isotonic. It could be an isokinetic, or it could be an calisthenic exercise. Any form of exercise you prescribe should be based on these two cardinal indications: limitation and ability. Each and everyone has got a limitation. Each and everyone has got the ability to perform the exercise. So your prescription should confine to these two protocols. So what is the FIT formula? We always tell FITT, when it comes to prescribe the exercises. F indicates frequency. How frequent they should do the exercises. It is, you should go for their risk problem and the problem associated with. A non-risk marker has been allowed to do more exercises, more exercise format than a risk marker. The risk marker, as we explained just now. So when it comes to frequency, generally we advise, for elderly people, we advise free walk low resistance and high endurance, high repetitions in order to improve the cardiovascular endurance. Low resistance, high repetitions. So for a free walk, for the group of people who are much aged, how frequently they can do it? Maybe you can tell them 5 days a week or maximum 6 days a week. They should have a days off in a week. You should not tell them to walk all the 7 days. It's a 5 to 6 days in a week is the ultimate frequency or a optimum frequency for a person to do the exercise when it comes to frequency. Then the I stands for intensity. I said FITT. I stands for intensity. Intensity, don't advise any isometric exercise for a patient who is above 50. Even if he suffers with osteoarthritis, knee joint, don't prescribe him isometric quadriceps exercise or isometric hamstring exercise. That will have a major impact on his cardiovascular system, especially if he has got coronary artery disease, a part of the coronary artery disease, or a person with on the verge of getting into coronary artery disease. Isometrics has got a bearing on the cardiovascular impact. So if you ask me, isotonics and isokinetics are the real good exercise when it comes to people who are above 50 for the prescription. That is what the intensity comes into play. The T is time frame. How much is the time frame they need to take it? Leave it to the individual. Let them decide. It could be a 50-minute format or a 30-minute format, but tell them to do 30 minutes of exercise, 15 minutes of stretching, 30 minutes of walking. 30 minutes of walking, 15 minutes of stretching exercise, which can be isotonic or isokinetic or calisthenic exercise, and 15 minutes of breathing combined with yoga and pranayama. So for 24 hours, an individual has to allot exactly 1 hour for his own way of taking health care. 30 minutes of walking, 15 minutes of exercises. It could be starting from stretching exercise, except isometrics for the elderly segment. A younger group can do isometrics. And when it comes to the remaining 15 minutes, you should do yoga and breathing exercise, and maybe an extra 5-10 minutes for transcendental meditation. You go to your mindset where you make yourself completely vacuum. You don't think about anything. You get into some religious version. It will up to the individuals. If he is a Baba devotee, he can get into Baba. If he is a Raghavendra devotee, he can say. If he is confined with Jesus, he can pray Jesus, and don't think about others for the remaining 10 minutes. So 1 hour and 10 minutes is the ideal way, and 5 to 6 days in a week is the best form of exercise prescribed by. The time frame, as I told you, fit, frequency, intensity, type of exercise, and time frame. This is where the prescription of exercise should be formulated. So now we will come to the stages of coronary artery disease. How the disease starts. As I told you some time back, it starts as a arteriosclerosis, which is nothing but erosion of the innermost layer of the coronary arterial wall. There is a lot of erosion takes place. If you happen to have one of the risk, which we just spoken to you, if you have a risk factor, the erosion will be double in nature. If you don't have that risk, the erosion will be there. Once this erosion is there, this is the first stage of the disease, what is called arteriosclerosis. Once the arteriosclerosis happens, there will be a reduced blood flow into the heart because of the erosions on either side of the blood vessel, which slows down. There is a reduced hemovelocity. The next part of the disease is called atherosclerosis. Only a H is being added into the first and second stage. First one is an arteriosclerosis. Second one is an atherosclerosis. Atheroma means porridge. Porridge means there is a block, plaque. See, you know all the metabolic byproducts are being taken to all parts of the body by the blood. So one of the, as I just explained, the low density lipoprotein has got the tendency to get deposited in a place where there is an erosion in the blood vessel. That is an arteriosclerotic patches. An arteriosclerotic patches in the blood vessel is the ideal platform for this fat, a low density lipoprotein get lodged. Once it gets lodged, it further reduces the lumen of the blood vessel. The lumen of the blood vessel is further reduced, and further it reduces the hemovelocity. The hemovelocity will come down. This is where we call it as a partial block in a blood vessel. This is where clinically a person is being diagnosed with ischemic heart disease. An ischemic heart disease is nothing but the supply is not met. There is a reduced blood supply to the myocardium. So whichever the branch of the coronary artery is getting blocked, where it goes and supplies, it will show the impact there. The demand is more, the supply is less. This is where the atherosclerosis, the atherosclerotic plaques, the deposits in the blood vessels produces reduced blood flow into the myocardium. This is the second stage. What is the third and the final stage of the coronary artery disease? So because of the reduced hemovelocity, the blood flow will slow down, and what it was the rapid pace of flow some 10-15 years back is being slowed down because of the block as well as the arteriosclerotic patches. Whenever there is a reduced hemovelocity, what will happen? You have cells in the blood called platelets. They started piling on one another. The platelet aggregation will take place. The platelets are biconcave in nature. The shape of the platelets are biconcave. It has a characteristic of adhering, getting stuck. You imagine you put coins one by one. The same way, because of its biconcave in nature, they started piling on the blood vessel where there is an arteriosclerosis as well as an atherosclerotic plaque deposit, atheroma. So this makes the way for the coronary thrombosis. A platelet aggregation into the site of atheroma is called coronary thrombosis, which can be progressive. One fine day, it will block the entire blood supply and leads up to myocardial infarction. Once the myocardial infarction takes place, you need to be hospitalized. As I go back to my very basic start of the class, what is cardiac arrest and heart attack? The cardiac arrest, the time frame you have is hardly 5 minutes. 5 minutes is the time spread between your cardiac arrest and death. Within 5 minutes, you need to start on CPR if you know the technique, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, or a hospital nearby or an ambulance with a defibrillator. You can put the defibrillator in the patient's chest and you can activate the myocardium by giving some electrical impulses. The time frame between cardiac arrest and death is only 5 minutes. Whereas in heart attack, the guard has given some warning signals, like there is a partial block leading up to complete block. Once the complete block, still if you are not getting up, you are not listening to the warning bell, it leads up to coronary thrombosis. See, once you have an ischemic heart disease, what are all the symptoms you tend to have? A patient who is having a severe ischemic heart disease will complain to you when it comes for osteoarthritis. Sir, last month நடந்த மாதிரிலாம் என்னால இப்ப நடக்க முடியல சார். நான் போய் பார்க்ல வந்து 2 ரவுண்ட் அடிச்சா ஃப்ரீயா இருக்கு, எனக்கு ஒன்றும் மூச்சே வாங்காது. இப்போ ஒரு ரவுண்ட் கம்ப்ளீட் பண்ணோடனே மூச்சு வாங்க ஆரம்பிக்குது சார். இதுதான் வந்து the earliest sign of breathlessness on mild exertion or with the routine activity. A mild exertion or with the routine activity, if you develop dyspnea of 4th grade. Dyspnea has been 4 grades. This is 4th grade dyspnea. See, if you happen to, I'm sorry, it is grade 1 dyspnea. Grade 1, I'm sorry, I'm going into the progressive way. This is grade 1 dyspnea after severe exertion or the routine activity. The second level is the same person after some time, after 2 or 3 minutes will complain to you, sir, after the walk of even one round, I'm not able to talk to my friends. I develop a lot of breathlessness. This is grade 2 dyspnea. Sometimes the same breathlessness happens when he is doing his routine activities like lifting something or gardening his, watering his garden, and a mild workout will produce breathlessness. And this is grade 3. And fourth grade is the most dangerous. It can happen during rest. It can happen during sleep. This is where a patient has to be very, very watchful when it comes to dyspnea. Dyspnea, chest pain are the major vulnerable symptoms of coronary artery disease, or a patient who is land up in myocardial infarction. So I said 4 levels of dyspnea. So when it's complaining of grade 4 dyspnea, so he has to be very, very careful. Yeah, intervention at the earliest level is needed. So this is when it comes to ischemic heart disease. What is angina pectoris? This is what happened. The God has again giving you, if you are not listening up to him in the first warning bell of ischemic heart disease, this breathlessness, you don't give much attention to the breathlessness. What will happen next? You start getting pain in the chest, a squeezing pain in the left part of the chest, or the costophrenic angle, or it can be in the retroscapular area, or it can be even in the trapezius area. Most squeezing pain, throbbing pain. They'll always hold the chest like this. And here you, as a therapist, you should discriminate between a non-cardiac pain and a cardiac pain. A patient, you can make it from the agony of his face. The agony of his is always associated with breathlessness, and you will always try to hold the chest with his palm of his hand. You will try to squeeze the chest when the pain starts. This is angina pectoris. Angina means pain, pectoris means chest. So you have stable angina and unstable angina. Stable angina comes out after a workout. After a usual workout or an extra bit of workout, if you develop chest pain, this is called stable angina. It will easily recognized by the patient or easily recognized by the individual. An unstable angina, he cannot recognize. It can happen during a least workout, a mild workout. This can happen. Whereas a Prince-Metal angina, it can happen during a workout or during rest. You cannot have pain. You cannot have breathlessness. Just your heart will start choking. This is what you call Prince-Metal angina. Stable angina, unstable angina, and Prince-Metal angina. See, these are all the wake-up call given by the God when you have coronary artery disease, whether you are in the second stage atherosclerosis or you are on the vulnerability of getting into coronary thrombosis. If you don't get waken up by these calls, you are landing up in an irreversible way. This is what the major difference between heart attack and cardiac arrest. Cardiac arrest, you don't have time to revive a patient. You don't have time to pull him off from death, from the jaws of death. Whereas in heart attack, you have some time, you can hospitalize him, thrombolize the patient, and pull him off. So what are when it comes to the different stages, what are the investigations an individual has to take up for where he is standing in the coronary artery disease? The simplest basic investigation is doing an electrocardiogram. Electrocardiogram is the basic test for electrocardiac activity of the heart. It can show you might have heard about ST elevation, ST depression, non-Q wave ECG, PR interval is increased. These are all supraventricular tachycardia or asymptomatic tachycardia, all those things. When you record the electrocardiogram, they will record the heart rate also. The computerized ECG will give you the report. But what I suggest for my friends, my students, you try to get a book called Basics of ECG by Dr. K.P. Mishra. He's a leading cardiologist who is no more now. He was the cardiologist for the President of India, and he was in our main Apollo hospital for 25 years. Dr. K.P. Misra has written so many books on ECG, but you take the basics of ECG, which costs you around 75 rupees. 106 pages, you can easily learn how to read an ECG, how to find out an abnormal ECG, how to differentiate from a normal ECG. Written by Dr. K.P. Misra, our own Indian, well explained ECG. You can show so many abnormal ECGs and you can make out. I just said, a person who has got a myocardial infarction already, the ECG will pick up even after 10 years. You can see a non-Q wave ECG. A Q wave in the ECG will not be there, which clearly shows the particular individual has got an MI already. It could be a lateral wall MI, or it could be an inferior wall MI, or it could be an anterior wall MI. It could be anywhere. But luckily, no intervention made. It was a moderate attack. The God has saved him. So, ECG is the basic tool when it comes to find out what is wrong with your heart initially. An ST elevation will show you are on the onset of getting the disease. Now, an ST depression will show you are on the verge of involving in ischemic heart disease. An ST depression is a hallmark of ischemic heart disease. An ST elevation is the onset of getting an MI. So now this comes to ECG, electrocardiogram. The next possible test you can see the status of your heart is the echocardiography, an ultrasonic image of your moving heart. You know the heart is a moving organ. It keeps contracting and relaxing, which happens roughly about 72 to 80 times. Sometimes when you run, it will happen more than 100 times. So it is very, very difficult in the initial stages to record passing an ultrasonic image on the moving tissue to record the ultrasonic images, the refractory images. But later on, they modified the technique and they find out the electronic images by ultrasonic waves. This is called echocardiography. In that, you can find out anything wrong with the valves, any arterial, aortic valve stenosis, mitral stenosis, pulmonary stenosis, or tricuspid valvular disease, any septal defect, atrial septal defect or ventricular septal defect, or a person is having some unusual pumping problem. It will show you an ejection fraction, EF. Any ejection fraction of 40% and more is considered as normal. Some people have 30%, some people have 60 to 75%. Ejection fraction is the pumping efficiency of the heart, which will be recorded by the echocardiography. So the third investigation is a treadmill test, otherwise called a stress ECG. A 12-lead stress ECG. A 12 leads will be fitted all over the body, and an individual is made to walk on a platform, and your cardiac activity will get inflamed. After 5 minutes, the speed of the platform will get increased, and after 5 minutes, they'll incline the platform. So you need to work against an inclined platform. The stress on the myocardium will be more when you walk with the increased speed and increase. All these times, your ECG is being monitored, and this is designed by what you call John Bruce, a cardiologist from Harvard University. He is an interventional cardiologist. John Bruce has designed this. Even this is called Bruce protocol. The method of doing treadmill disease is called Bruce protocol. This will give you a physical strain induces ischemia into your heart. A positive stress ECG is a clear indication for the further intervention. A negative stress ECG, you think you are lucky, you have your heart is functioning normally. This is as far as the treadmill test is concerned. Now next comes the PET scan, positron emission tomography. Positron emission, it's a nuclear tag is being inserted and it will go and pick up. Now you can see earlier we had about 256 slice CT. Now you have 512 slice CT. What is this PET scan does? It slices the myocardium into so many pieces and see which part of the myocardium has got lesser blood supply. Which part of the myocardium has got lesser blood supply. This is what the 256 slice CT or 512 slice CT does. So with then even after this, no clear picture is emerging. The cardiologist asks you to go for a Holter monitor. There will be a mini device given fitted into your body, and you can put it in your pan pocket, and it will monitor your ECG for 24 hours, which will be readable by your own cardiologist. You can see which the only thing you need to you have to record your activity. At what time you have gone for walking, what time you've gone to the bed, what time you have taken your breakfast, all those things you have for 24 hours. This is called Holter monitor, which will give you some useful information to the cardiologist who happen to treat you. So what induces it is based on that, he will advise you avoid this, avoid that. So all these investigations will give you only something. No investigation so far we have done is giving you a clear picture. Imagine, see, I am telling you repeatedly, all these investigations will give you only a piece of information. A piece of information to treat you temporarily, a temporary investigation tool. What is it? Where we get the complete picture? It is by doing a coronary angiogram. It is like a 7-member Supreme Court judgment. What happened when the Supreme Court, in most of the cases, they refer to the 3-bench, then 5-member bench, then at last there is a constitutional crisis. They refer to the 7-member. All the senior most 7 judges of the Supreme Court will sit and give the verdict, which is usually not a biased one. So likewise, a clear picture, a most reliable picture will emerge only if you happen to do a coronary angiogram. It can be done using your femoral artery, or it can be used by femoral brachial artery. A catheter is being passed into your body and a dye is being injected. It will pass through the branches of the coronary artery, and it will go and stop where the block is there, and they can mark that area tomographically. They can mark that area and give you how much block is there. As I told you already, if you happen to read the angiogram report, they will say LAD, the most vulnerable, most dangerous blood vessel disease is left anterior descending artery, the most important branch of the left coronary artery. If you have a 90% block, you need to take the immediate intervention. Likewise, it will give you a complete picture where the individual is standing when it comes to coronary angiogram. So after doing coronary angiogram, what are the decisions a cardiologist should make? A cardiologist should tell you, sir, you are the case. You cannot go for even bypass. CAPG is not suitable for you. You can ask why. The patient, as a matter of interest, he'll ask him, why sir, then bypass பண்ணிக்கிறாங்களே ஏன் bypass கூட எனக்கு பண்ண முடியாதுன்றீங்கன்னு கேட்கலாம். The problem in the angiogram is the main blood vessel is blocked, and the branches of the main blood vessel, it will have more than 3-4 branches. Even in the branches, you will have so many blocks. So it is not, if you clear the main block, the blood will not flow into the branches because the branches are also being blocked. So doing a graft is out of proposition. Doing a CABG is not possible here. So what they advise, you lead a partially sedentary life, do a lot of physical activity without straining yourself, consult a therapist. He will give you a protocol where you can lead with a very good quality of life, with doing a lot of exercises, and you refer to your dietitian, what sort of a diet. She will advise you to the diet pattern. This is what a cardiologist does after seeing the cath report. What is the second option? The second option, he may tell, sir, in your case, I think CABG is the only option. You consult a cardiothoracic surgeon, you go for the CABG at the earliest. Admit yourself. You know the cost of CABG nowadays? It costs you 10 lakhs. It costs you 10 lakhs, 5 to 10 lakhs. It's the package. For a middle class person, after his retirement, usually this disease strikes after his retirement, all the lifetime savings will go only for this particular treatment. So imagine CABG is not not at all expensive. What they subject to is the CAPG. Most of the good cardiologists, they will catch hold of the patient at the earliest and send you to a therapist and a dietitian to work on him and pull him out of here and advise him into a good quality lifestyle so that he can avoid a bypass. This is where I stand. The coronary artery disease is preventable. People who are optimistic, this disease can be preventable. This disease cannot be preventable. You cannot say it is a divine will. It's a God's wish. He has died. He has got a massive attack. He has died. But you need to make a self-analysis where you are standing. You allot out of 24 hours in a day. Allot 1 hour for your body every day. Every day you just spend 1 hour for your body. You made a lot of subjective and objective assessments for the patients who are coming to you. You need to do the subjective and objective assessment for your own health. If you happen to do that, I think you can. There is no need to go for any CAPG. This is where the divine will also can be broken up. I'm not asking about it's a God's will. So at last I'll ask him, even the CAPG is the permanent resolution or a permanent remedy? Not so. Because I have seen people who are already been subjected to CAPG, develop a block in the grafted artery and go for a second CAPG, or the sutured area will develop new blocks, the area where they are being suturing the graft. They are taking the graft from the legs, either from the venous graft or an arterial graft, and putting it in the blocked artery. They can develop blocks in the suturing area or in a newly developed or a newly grafted artery. But the most preferred artery, as far as I know, is the internal memory artery, which has got the peculiar feature of the only artery in the human body which does not show any degenerative changes even for a 90-year-old man. Internal memory artery, IMA. IMA is very difficult to procure, but most of the cardiothoracic surgeons, they prefer IMA or radial artery or brachial artery, or if not, the venous graft from the long saphenous veins from the legs. So I explained to you how CAPG is expensive, how CAPG is not the solution for coronary artery disease, what you should do as an individual, how to prevent it. This is where, as a therapist, as I told you, the time you spend with the patient is matter most. You need not project yourself from a medical fraternity. Just go through the reports, whatever he carries along with you. Generally, the patient coming to you prefer you to look into the reports other than even physiotherapy modality. Even he will show you, thinking about you are a doctor, you know everything. He will show you, madam, this is the ECG I had taken yesterday. Can you go through it and tell me what is wrong with me? This is what the blood report I had done yesterday. So can you explain to me what is wrong? Because most of the doctors nowadays, they don't spend time with the patients. They are so busy. In fact, they don't answer to the patient's questions. They'll get irritated and they'll ask them to say, this is what is happening to you. Go and take the medicines I prescribe. Don't ask me too many questions. They'll pull him up. Whereas here is the domain. Here is the domain for the therapist to explain to your patient, talk to him well in detail. This is what the problems you carry. Still, you can pull him yourself off. Do these exercises. There is a change in the diet pattern. Do all those things. This is what you can advise as a therapist. But this is what we call it as an interventional cardiologist. You find a portion being allotted to cardio preventive physiotherapy in coronary artery disease in interventional cardiology. So the therapists are not only treating an ailment, even the same therapist can act as a preventing a disease, a dreadful disease called coronary artery disease. So I forgot to tell you, I test a patient with a severe chest pain in the middle of the night, goes to an hospital, nearby hospital. They will do a very simple test called TROP-T test. TROP-T, you all must have heard about it. TROP-T, taking a tiny drop of blood from your blood vessel, and they do the test, and you will get the report within 10 minutes. This is called positive. If they get it a TROP-T, it shows you have an onset of MI. Troponin T is a type of protein is being released into the bloodstream. Troponin T. Once this protein is released in your bloodstream, that can be picked up by a tiny drop of the blood, which will show you a TROP-T test positive, which is the onset of MI for an individual. Then otherwise, the enzymes will get elevated. Liver enzymes will get elevated. Your SGOT, PT, CRP, all those liver enzymes will get elevated and then establish the MI. But for an early MI, TROP-T test is the most simplest form of finding, confirming an onset of MI. There is a boy from Osur school by Akash Manoj. He has come out with an app. It can pick up even the silent heart attack. Silent heart attack takes place for people with diabetic, people who are on the sleep. You can tie it around the arm. It will be connected to your mobile device. It's not by wire, by an app. It will intimate. You can connect almost 5 numbers in that app. A small device, a wristband like, which costs you around 900 rupees to 1100 rupees. And this will pick up the release of this troponin T in your system. It will pick up very early before you even go to your lab. The moment it gets released into your blood, this device, the software will pick up the release of troponin T in the blood and sends you the signals, alarming you through your mobile and your relative's mobile, whichever the mobile number is being linked with. He has been awarded by the President of India, by Pranab Mukherjee, in the year 2017. A Osur boy by name Akash Manoj. You can put it in the Google and find out. He is the boy. He has been awarded by the Indian government of India. See, a boy is doing so much of research because he lost his grandfather in much early when he was in the 5th standard. So he made it a point that this heart attack, because on the way of taking him to the hospital, he has died. He made it a point, I have to do something when I am in the school itself. So he has done a research and comes out with a simple software called TROP-T software, which is available for the price of 900 to 1100 rupees. So this is where, in nutshell, yet coronary artery disease is easily preventable, provided you make the intervention at the right age. If you ask me, you should start the intervention at the age of between 25 to 30 years. So imagine, you can ask, so many youngsters are dying because of heart attack, massive heart attack. Why it is so? Young man, a 30-year-old South Indian, died of massive heart attack. For him, you cannot expect atherosclerosis or coronary thrombosis being formed inside the coronary arteries. So what is happening is, a young individual with a lot of stress, the brain releases a chemical substance called catecholamines. Once it is being released, it strikes the coronary arteries. It induces the coronary artery spasm. It is almost like cardiac arrest. The arteries will get jammed overnight, over a minute. With the release of catecholamine, still a lot of research is going on. How the catecholamine is being released into our system. It is a complex physiological and endocrine subject which nobody comes out clearly. How the catecholamine is released, why the catecholamine is released for some people, and producing coronary artery spasm. The spasm will jam the blood vessels. The blood vessels become choked and he dies almost like a patient with the cardiac arrest. Even a patient with the cardiac arrest, as I told you, he has got 5 minutes to revive his life. During cardiac arrest, the pupils are well contracted. If you put the light on his pupils, it will get enlarged, reacting to light. The same pupils, after 5 minutes, will get dilated without putting a torch. That is the sign of death. Difference between death and cardiac arrest is only 5 minutes. So a patient with the coronary artery spasm, with the release of catecholamine in the bloodstream, also lands in the same site. We can't do any, there is a lot of research is going on how to prevent the release of catecholamines all over the world. But strongly, one university, Harvard University in Boston, they adopted a village in the suburb of Boston called Framingham. It is a study accepted by New York Heart Association, accepted all over the world. Even the World Health Organization is considering whatever the data, whatever the study given by the Framingham, a suburb in Boston attached to the Harvard University, when it comes to interventional cardiology and prevention of coronary artery disease. As I strongly say, this disease is easily, very easily preventable, provided you have a change in your lifestyle. Whatever the lifestyle I said, if you are a smoker, stop the smoking. There is no point in reducing your smoking. Quit the smoking overnight. If you are into stress, find a way to de-stress yourself. There is always, God has given so many ways of de-stressing yourself. Everyone has got a stress, right? From school-going boy to office-going man, a retired person, everyone has got a stress. You should make a way to de-stress yourself. And if you are having dyslipidemia, and consult a dietitian and get into a therapist, he will give you the exercise program and diet pattern so that this dyslipidemia will get corrected. And for a hypertension, a cardiologist will prescribe the right antihypertensives. For people with diabetes, these are all should be, it's a teamwork. It's a teamwork, but majority of the teamwork and majority of the time should be spent by the therapist. That's why I'm emphasizing on this subject wherever I go. This is the subject, though I have passion for orthopedics, I solemnize myself on this particular topic in cardiology. No other topics, but this particular topic is most close to my heart, and my passion is for orthopedics. So wherever I go, I speak about this topic and try to tell the next generation of people or the student community, focus on one's lifestyle, listen to him, get into his blood report and all those reports, try to learn how to read those reports. As I told you, to read the ECG, this all comes by repetition. If you keep reading, it will definitely you'll come to a habit of what is normal, what is abnormal, what is the remedy for this. So with this few words, I thank the Alumni Association for giving me a chance to talk about this. And I think I have given you some take-home message. People who believe that this disease is preventable are optimistic. They come in the optimistic group. People say, இதெல்லாம் வேலைக்கு ஆகாதுப்பா, சும்மா எவன பேஷண்ட பார்க்கறது, எந்த blood report பார்க்கறது, எவனுக்கு எக்ஸசைஸ் சொல்றது. They are coming under divine will. Even the CAPG is the only solution. I say, even most of the cardiologists, they don't advise CAPG, because the more and more they do CAPG, you are interfering with the nature, because nature don't find way to form collaterals. If in these last 6 months, during this COVID-19, the incidence of coronary myocardial infarction has come down drastically across the world, especially in India. The incidence of MI has come down, but the COVID-19 produces intravascular coagulation. The virus infection causing, don't confuse. The same thrombosis is being formed. Earlier it was in the pulmonary artery. Now it strikes almost all the arteries, producing intravascular coagulation. The God has given a beautiful property for the blood. Once the blood is coming out of the blood vessel, it will get into clot within 8 to 10 seconds, because the God does not want to waste your blood. The same clot is forming inside the blood vessel is called thrombosis. So when it happens, you have an irreversible damage. That's why I said CAPG is not the remedial solution. More and more they do CAPG, the formation of collaterals will not happen. The collaterals, you are interfering with the nature, so you will find the collaterals coming up if it is a blocked blood vessels. With this, I am coming to the end of this episode. If there are questions, I am very happy to take up the questions and answer to that. Thanks, Amal Mohan. You can now, the mic is yours.
Thanks a lot, sir. It is really nostalgic to listen to this session, sir. You have taken us back to 25 years. And thanks a lot for our information which you have shared. And our knowledge is doubled. And I request this session to be open for questions. The session is open for questions.
Okay. Myself, I am asking Kisami. It's very good. You have got immense knowledge. I appreciate. but you have to be concise and focused. And
Yes,
you
sir.
said that diabetic is a beautiful disease. Why you say diabetic is a beautiful disease?
Yeah, as long as you wake up and control this disease, it doesn't do any harm unless if you have a good control. I have seen many of my patients who are on insulin for 35 to 40 years. They don't have any complications. They don't have any complications. I have a list of patients who are coming to me who are happen to be on insulin for almost 35 years. If they go to an ophthalmologist, the ophthalmologist will tell them, "Oh, what a beautiful eyes! You don't have even any of your retina is perfectly all right." When they go to a nephrology, you say all the renal parameters are good. I can show you a lot of because the intervention should happen at the right time, sir.
Okay.
The treatment of
I
as
don't
long
want
as
to
it
go.
doesn't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's okay. As long as you take control of the diabetes. Actually,
Yes.
I am a victim of all the things. I got the LAD.
Yes, sir.
I got a stent, and I got
Yes,
a
sir.
diabetic.
Yes, sir.
And I got a total knee replacement. I become a kid. Still, thank God, I'm surviving and taking part in it. Now you said,
God will.
yeah,
Yes, sir.
yeah. I'm sorry. I just want to enlighten. I'm not here to bully you or to ask many questions. Just want. I appreciate your knowledge. You said the cabbage is not the permanent solution. I do agree that sometimes if I have seen some patients, they go for another complication to redo the surgery. Even twice they have gone through the cabbage. Then what is the solution? If you say the person, in order to prevent this, I agree with you, I consider it is a preventable disease, provided the health and the diet and the thing is been taken into consideration from the age of 25 to 30 or annually they get checked up, then you can put, otherwise it is not. Because
Yes,
we
sir.
people, as an Indian, we run all the time, work with our family load and commitment, run behind the money, every one of us. So there is a lot of stress. So there is what I am trying to say. Unless you take steps in advance, it can be it is preventable. Otherwise, it is not. We run across the stress and the strain, and they end up without control when you diet, what they are eating, and everything. It goes to the complications. You see.
Yes, sir.
So that's what I'm trying. Unless they take early steps, I don't
Yes,
know how
sir.
to take. Yeah, we don't do that actually.
Yes, sir. For your kind information, sir, you just look into Dr. Pramod Tripathi from Bombay.
Mhm.
He is
No, I
not for
don't.
insulin. He is not for anti-diabetic measures in the form of drugs.
Yeah, there are many people who do not for the formation advice of the blood for with insulin and the glyceride or Abril. They are not
Yes,
for
sir.
it. They say that you can't control
Yes, sir.
with the diet. Recently I heard millet is the best source for diabetic people. I take a lot of millet, like the chana and all that. So now,
Okay, sir.
last week I heard millet is the best rather than the rice and the other
Excellent.
food.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Some people, yes, sir. Millets has got a plenty of iron, calcium, and other minerals, magnesium.
Yes.
But people get confused between wheat and rice, sir. That's why wheat, the basic difference between wheat and rice is wheat is a fiber diet and rice is a non-fiber diet. A fiber diet, fiber, when it comes to carbohydrate fragment, the ratio is marginally low on the wheat, sir. So
Yes,
that's why.
yeah, I'm sorry to
So
interrupt you.
sorry to interrupt, sir. There's a lot of pending questions in the chat
So
box.
I'll just
Sorry to
finish it.
interrupt,
This
sir.
is the last. If you
Okay.
take the consideration of the fiber and the salt between the wheat and the rice, this is almost
sir.
the same. If you go into the US market and compare the bread and the rice, it's almost the same. As I said,
Yes, sir.
the fiber is less in the rice, the fiber is more in the wheat. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So there's one more question from Mohammed Tawfiq.
Yes,
Can
sir.
you explain about the ejection fraction? Is it possible to improve the low ejection fraction, for example, from 28 to say about 40 by physical activity?
Yeah, the ejection fraction is indicating your left ventricular pumping efficiency. your left ventricular pumping efficiency is there, is an early sign of ventricular fibrillation. As long as the pumping, the contraction and relaxation of the left ventricle is good, irrespective of the percentage, the individual will do well. The ejection fraction is just pointing out to the left ventricle, a small portion of the left atrium. How good is heart when it pumping the blood, whether the individual is on the verge of getting ventricular fibrillation or ventricular failure or ventricular hypertrophy. Say a person with the ventricular hypertrophy will have a reduced ejection fraction, but all this ventricular fibrillation can be pulled off with the change in lifestyle, irrespective of the time you intervene. Hope I answered to his question. Even people with less than 30% with their corrected lifestyle, their corrected remedial lifestyle, they keep moving up in the ejection fraction through 30%, 32% in a 6 months time. So at last, when it comes to only the changes in your lifestyle.
Hello, Krishnaswamy.
Yes.
Very good presentation.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
I have one question. Okay, this coronary
Yes,
angiogram
ma'am.
we are doing, no, to find out that stages
Yes, ma'am.
and everything. Any complications will
Yes,
be
ma'am.
produced after this coronary angiogram?
Definitely, ma'am. The catheter itself can produce a clot.
Yeah.
So imagine there is a two technique called Sohn's technique. Sohn's, S-O-N-E, Sohn's technique, catching hold of the brachial artery.
Okay.
Earlier days they were doing only Sohn's technique through the brachial artery. A fistula is being created in the arm, through which the catheter is being inserted, which producing a lot of complications, and they lose some of the patients on the cath lab itself.
Okay.
Then they stopped the cath for doing it. Then they come back and catch hold of the femoral artery, because the catheter itself, when it passes through, can produces a stricture in the coronary artery. Hope you understand what is stricture, ma'am. A stricture in the coronary artery and producing the collapse. So it is 10 to 25% risky, ma'am. And the dye they give also is not acceptable to the patient. If the body is rejecting the dye they are using when they do cath coronary angiogram, can be allergic to the patient and can produce allergic manifestations. The cath is also risky. Any intervention is risky. This is what I call complication to the threat to the life also is there, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. You're clear, ma'am? Madam Tulsibai, ma'am?
I guess there's some problem with the network, sir. Like she's been paused.
Okay, we'll take up the next question, Amal.
With your permission, regarding the previous question about EF, I like to throw some light on it, sir. So you were telling about the cardiac LV enlargement, and there is studies which says that eccentric remodeling, which is physiological, between 12 mm to 16 mm, can increase the ejection fraction, and this works on the system of Frank-Starling law. So, of course, exercise does help. So that's what I wanted to conclude, sir. There's one more question, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I also heard about it, Amal. I also heard about it, but I am not focused into it. I heard about this formula. Okay.
Yes, sir. Nice, sir.
They're using electrophysiological studies.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So this next question, sir, is hypothyroidism related to coronary artery disease?
No, absolutely. Hypothyroid secretes thyroxine, which is a growth hormone, which will not have any impact on the coronary artery disease, as far as I know. I haven't studied a patient who was being hypothyroidism for many years, who is on thyroxine. They take either Eltroxin or Thyronorm prescribed by the endocrinologist. I don't find this will be a predisposing factor for coronary artery disease. Even I clarified many times with the cardiologist also. They said clearly it has no impact, because when they diagnose a patient, they put known hypothyroidism, diabetic, known hypertensive. As a matter of learning, I have gone to the cardiologist asking, hypothyroidism is anything to do with the producing coronary artery disease. They said no, absolutely no effect on hypothyroidism. Thanks. Hope you are clear.
Yes, sir.
One suggestion.
Yes, sir.
Hyperthyroidism, most of the cases that I've gone through during my experience, very rarely elder, after 45 years, 50 years, they get a problem. But usually, mostly the younger age groups are getting more of hyperthyroidism rather than the hyperthyroid.
Exactly, sir. So people, youngsters with a lot of PCOD also, the young girls, it's on the rise, sir.
Yes.
So one of the reasons is hypothyroidism setting up at the early.
Yeah.
So once for late age group, you never see a fresh hypothyroidism coming up.
True.
Below 30 years, the hypothyroidism is more imminent than people above the age of 30 years, sir.
That's correct.
That's what I observed. That's what I observed, sir. Thank you, sir.
So you were mentioning about transcendental meditation.
Yes.
Like, what is your take on transcendental meditation versus mindful meditation, mindfulness meditation?
See, absolutely, you need to come out of the world, of your own world I'm talking about, and take yourself into a area where there is a lot of vacuum. Absolutely, you don't think about anything, and try to memorize yourself. You try to do memorize yourself, coupled with breathing exercises. Don't think about anything happened in the past. Don't think about anything which is going to happen in the future. Live for the day. The norm is you have to live for that particular day. That should be the norm. As far as me, past is a cancel check. Yeah, with the cancel check, you will not do anything. Yeah, future is a promissory note. You don't get any promise out of the promissory note. It can happen, it may not happen. But what the today is the liquid cash in your hand. You can buy whatever you want, whatever you do. That's what you ought to take your mind into that level, and coupled with introspect with the breathing exercises. That's what one's way of doing transcendental meditation, designed by some experts in the form of who are good knowledge in the transcendental meditation. I have no idea about the other part of your question. Okay, if you know, you can just come out with the Amal.
Because like
I'm very happy.
Yes, sir. Most of the researchers are stating about mindful meditation these days, and they have a positive outcome. But of course, you did answer in a different way. Concentrate on the moment, which is an idea of Japanese idea, which says ichigo ichi. That's idea. Live for the moment. That really helps. And this ichigo ichi is practiced in Okinawa, the island in Japan, where there are centennial people who live. They live after 100 years. And cardiac arrest, those things are very uncommon in this island. So thanks a lot, sir. Thanks for the mind-blowing answers, sir. I think Tulasibai ma'am is again online, sir. Tulasibai ma'am?
Yes. My current has gone. That's why. Okay, there's coronary angiogram and the shunt will be, they will do the same procedure.
Yes, ma'am. Once they know that. Yes, ma'am. Once they do coronary angiogram. As a second part of the procedure, they'll take either an anticoagulant coated stent and put it on the area where there is a block. On either they clear the block, pushing a balloon. This is a part of a angiogram is a diagnostic procedure. Once they know, they have to get into the therapeutic procedure by clearing the block, pushing a balloon, what you call a angioplasty, clear the block, then keep the stent on either side, an anticoagulant, so that the lumen of the blood vessel is get widened up. So the anticoagulant coated stent will be placed on the side where there is a block. This is practically possible, ma'am. They are doing it. But your first
Any complication? Yes. Any complication after this doing this? Any complication after doing this angiogram?
Yes, ma'am. That's what I'm trying to say. They use a dye. To do a angiogram, they use the ionic dye or non-ionic dye. Your body can reject the dye and produce allergic manifestations, which is risky to the life. Sometimes the catheter itself can produce a stricture in the coronary arteries. It can swindle the coronary artery and producing death on the cath lab itself, which happens very rarely. Now there is a flexible catheters are coming up.
Okay.
The early part of the angiogram, they were using a non-flexible catheter.
Okay.
It goes around the coronary artery and producing a stricture in the coronary artery, and the patient lies on the table itself, on the lab itself, cath lab itself.
Okay. Yeah, because now
Yeah,
one
ma'am.
of my friend, she had this
Yeah.
same thing, coronary angiogram plus shunt they did. After 1 year,
Okay,
she
ma'am.
has an allergic. So that's
Okay.
why I wanted to know.
Yeah, this is a late reaction of the anticoagulants coated in the stent, ma'am. Perhaps he must have had because it is a titanium metal, ma'am, they use.
Okay.
Now they use oxynium metal. Earlier they were using titanium, very thin filament titanium metal.
Okay.
Now the most advanced metal is called oxynium. Most acceptable, most compatible for the human body.
Okay.
Metal called oxynium. They use it for the stent, which is coated with the anticoagulants.
Okay.
When it comes to anticoagulant, I want to include aspirin. I forgot to tell you, people who are on aspirin, it's a blood thinner. You all know that everyone takes an aspirin. Take an aspirin every day, keep the heart attack away. That's a norm actually.
Okay.
The aspirin, either clopidogrel, the clopidogrel, or they are called a platelet disaggregator. They don't allow the platelets to come together.
Together. Okay.
So taking an aspirin will to large scale prevent a thrombosis.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
SK.
Ma'am,
SK.
sir, ma'am, there is
Yes,
one
ma'am.
more question, ma'am.
Sir, study, Amal.
Ma'am, can I go ahead?
Yes, Amol.
yeah.
Yes, Amol.
There's a question from Shrutilaya Jnanaprakash. Is it PTCA better? PTCA.
Yeah, this is again percutaneous transluminal coronary angioplasty is possible only for a single vessel block, provided the particular vessel should not have blocks in its branches. Right? Clear? The PTCA is most perfect procedure for a vessel which has its block and its branches should be block free. So if you ask me, all the Chinese prefer only PTCA. They are not for CAPG. If you ask Chinese, the moment they open the sternum, the soul is out of the heart, out of the body, so they don't want to have CAPG. They don't want to open the CAPG. Now, of late, they are accepting for beating heart surgery. That is the latest concept in CAPG. They allow the heart to beat, and still they go and perform the bypass and comes out, which the Chinese practice nowadays. But earlier, Chinese were undergoing large scale of PTCA. It is a most apted, most result producing procedure for a single vessel block with no blocks in the branches of the same artery, same artery. Hope Shrutilaya is convinced with my answer.
So there's one more question from Shrutilaya.
Yeah.
Sir, for hypertension, which is the best type of exercise you prefer?
I prefer aerobics and keeping your MET up to 80% of the MET. You know the target heart rate? 220 minus your age is the target heart rate. For people who are hypertensive, they should start with 60% of the target heart rate. Imagine an individual who is 50-year-old. 220 minus 50 is 170. 60% of the 170 is 85 plus 17, 92. 92 is the 60% of the target heart rate. They have to start from 60%, increase it to 65% in 2 weeks' time, increase to another 5%, 70% in the next 2 weeks, 70%, and gradually increase and keep up to 80%. 80% of the target heart rate, if they attain it. Nowadays, you have the pulse cassiometer, which will tell you the pulse rate immediately. Now you have the pulse oximeter, likewise, only the cassio band is there, which will give you the heart reading, the pulse rate, and anything around starting from 60% of the target heart rate to 80% as a progressive measure, which should go on for, or for that matter, even 2.5% of increase every 2 weeks will be a very effective exercise program for people with hypertensives coupled with antihypertensives, irrespective of the group, as I already, either can be a beta blockers, ACE inhibitors, or ARB drugs, or alpha blockers, or calcium channel blockers, or diuretics. Whatever the group of drugs they take, they need to do plenty of aerobic exercise with target heart rate. It's a Kosterman's formula. Kosterman is the eminent cardiologist. Kosterman's formula, 220 minus age is the target heart rate. Okay? 60% of the target heart rate they should start with. Clear, Shrutilaya? Amal, are you clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There's a question from Shrutilaya. That's it, sir. That's yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's it. Ma'am, Devika, ma'am.
Madam Francis, ma'am.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Next, ma'am. Madam Francis.
Yes, SK was really very nice. ரொம்ப நல்லா இருந்தது. I thank you very much for this. And one question, you said aspirin can be taken. Can anybody take aspirin without doctor's prescription?
Yeah.
Even me, I am a diabetic patient.
You can take, but you have to see, when you take aspirin, you have to look out for the complications. For example, aspirin increases the tendency for bleeding. The bleeding can happen inside the body. The most vulnerable site of bleeding is your digestive system, intestinal bleed. If you have the intestinal bleed because of aspirin intake over a period of time, you can pass black-colored stools. Black-colored stools, you will find that is the sign of, that is called melena.
Okay.
That is the sign of aspirin producing a bleed inside. So basically it is given as a prophylactic measure in order to thin your blood, in order to make your platelets free from each other. It's a wonderful drug, ma'am. You should take it along with the food.
Okay. I am a diabetic patient. Can I take it without the advice of a doctor? I can take it.
75 milligram. Minimum 75 milligram, maximum is 150 milligram. Maybe you can have a word with your cardiologist or your family physician to about this. With this, you can go for aspirin, man. It does a lot of wonderful effects, man. Very cost effective. Very.
From which age we can take aspirin?
Anyone after 40. Anyone the age above 40. 1 tablet a day. It is available along with statins, ma'am. Ecosprin AV 150, Ecosprin AV 75. It along with the statin, madam.
Okay.
Take care of your cholesterol. Statin will take care of the cholesterol.
Excuse me,
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Please, sir.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No problem.
Devika Rani,
Yes,
I
sir.
will strongly advise you, even to any medicine, aspirin, it is not so joke to take without the consult of the doctor. You
Yes, that's
should
right.
ask your doctor and take whatever it may go. It is not a very harmful. It is a harmful. Just for small thing, it bleeds. So you better always, it is a standing rule. If you are on any diabetes, you are a diabetic, and if you want to take all that, you should consult the doctor and take any medicine. If you are taking already some medicine, you should not. Apart from that, if you are taking any medicine, it is always wise to talk to the doctor and get the advice and take it.
Yes,
We
sir.
are-
But
we
one of my classmates is taking aspirin for a long time. I don't want to mention her name. That's why I asked Krishna Swami. Yeah.
Ma'am, one more thing I want to add. Whenever you take aspirin, you even to go to a dentist for dental extraction or any procedure, you should inform him that you are on aspirin.
Okay.
Because you need to stop aspirin before taking up any procedure,
Bleeding.
any surgery.
Okay.
Yeah, the bleeding will happen after extraction or any surgery.
Okay.
You need to stop aspirin for a week before the procedure. But
Yes.
nothing wrong. 99% it doesn't produce any side effect, bleeding and all. Better to ask your family physician, get his concern, and you can start it. It's a wonderful drug, ma'am. So
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, Krishna Swami, as you said,
Yes, sir.
minimum 5 days to 10 days they have to stop before any surgical procedure.
Yes, sir. Exactly. That's what I said, sir.
Yes, you said 7 days, and please minimum 5 to 10 days.
Yes.
You
Yes,
cannot
sir.
put a knife on the body if they are taking an aspirin.
Yes, sir. It increases the bleeding. Yeah.
Yes.
Any other questions, Amal?
That's it, sir. That comes to the end of the question. With your
Excuse me.
permission.
Hello. Hello.
Hello,
Yeah, good
yes,
evening.
yes.
Amal, with your permission, can I have a question with SK, sir, please?
Yes, madam. Selvi, madam, most welcome. Please go
Sir,
ahead.
good evening. Good evening,
Good
sir.
evening, good evening. Good
So
evening.
thank you for the holistic approach. Hope you have
Yeah.
kindled all of us to be a exercise person. So I have a question, sir. Being a physiotherapist, do you advise us to follow any precautions before CPR? Any do's and don'ts, special indications or any clinical signs we need to follow before performing a CPR?
So make sure it is a cardiac arrest. Make sure his heart is fibrillating. That is possible with only experience, right? So with the experience only, you can see whether the patient is on cardiac arrest, but nothing wrong in doing an CPR for a patient who is sinking on the grave. Okay. As far as precautions concerned, there is no time for you to take precautions. You know where to place your arm, both the hands,
Yes, sir.
how to give him the breathing air. Okay. So there is no need for you to take any precautions. It's a life-saving procedure. Make sure, and he is fibrillating, and he needs CPR. Only with the experience you can find out whether the individual requiring CPR or not. But lot of books says what is CPR training is going on in intensive medical care unit for a day or so. You can learn, and nothing wrong in practicing it, Selvi, ma'am.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Selvi. Thank you. Bye. Any other questions, Amal?
Thanks a lot, sir. That's it, sir. With your permission, like if you say, you can wind up the session, sir.
Yeah, I want to add my passion for orthopedics. So I insist. Next topic I like to have joints. If Alumni Association permits, we will open light on joint stiffness. Right? We'll talk about joints and how to alleviate joint stiffness, preventive as well as therapeutic. If given a chance, I am ready to talk about joint and stiffness.
Definitely, sir. These sessions are always
Yes.
open for you, sir. And there is a lot of thanks messages and appreciation messages pouring into the chat box, sir. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, SK. Thank you very
Thanks a
much.
lot.
I
We'll meet
feel
next week.
really happy to share my 42 years.
Krishnasamy.
Yes, ma'am.
Very nice, very clear.
May I know who is calling?
Thank you very much for the presentation.
May I know who is calling, ma'am?
I am Lily Pushpam.
Oh, Lily Pushpam. Thank you so much, madam. Yesterday you had a welcome message. Thank you so much. Hope your questions
Thank you. Nice.
hope your questions are answered.
Yeah.
So I started my 42 years of my association with Professor Rangabashyam and Professor Thanigachalam. Of course, Professor Rangabashyam is no more, and Professor I have just shared my experience with all my teachers, my colleagues and friends. Thank you for the opportunity given to me. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, sir.